Welcome to the Dream Journal. From the studios in KSQD in Santa Cruz, the Dream Journal is a weekly show where we explore the power of nighttime dreams through conversations with dream experts and with listeners like you.
In the house behind, the life you find is something understood.
A dream can be meaningful without having to know what it means. Today's music is Exo Mentissimo, Out of Your Mind. Thank you to Rick Kleffel. When your mind does not generate images, how does that affect your dreaming? Aphantasia affects as much as 5% of the population. Are you an aphant? Learn more with our guest, Paulina Trevena, PhD. I am your host, Catherine Bell of Experiential Dreamwork, and welcome to the Dream Journal. We are also a weekly podcast. Please subscribe, rate, and review. It helps us work the algorithm so people find out about the journal and then learn about dreaming. That is, after all, the mission of the show, to get people talking about dreaming. Archives are available at Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and also all those good places. You can also find it at ksqd.org/the-dream-journal. All right, Paulina, hello. Thanks for coming on the show.
Hi, Catherine. Thanks for inviting me.
Excellent. All right, let me introduce you. Paulina Trevena, PhD, is a hypnotherapist, educator, and researcher. After years in academic research, Paulina discovered the fascinating world of hypnosis and was hooked. However, Paulina found her aphantasia was a barrier to accessing hypnosis. This led her to research and now educate on the best practices in working with aphantasics. Now, I've heard this said a couple ways, aphantasics, aphantasiacs. But Paulina, let's just start. What the heck is aphantasia, and why should I be, what is this? What is important about that?
Okay. Instead of explaining, shall I just quickly do a very quick exercise with you?
Sure, please.
Yeah? So I'd just like you to close your eyes for a moment.
Okay.
And just imagine an apple, say a green apple.
Okay.
Just imagine it, picture it in your mind's eye. Really hone in on that picture. And open your eyes.
Mm-hmm.
And just tell me, did you actually see a picture of an apple?
I did, yes. It was very vivid. In fact, I started to see the inside of the apple and seeing all the seeds and the core and all that. But I saw the skin and all the little dots on it and the stem and all that. Yeah.
Okay. Then let's just do another really short exercise. Okay. Close your eyes once again.
Okay.
And now just imagine that you're in an apple orchard. Just for a moment, you're in an apple orchard, beautiful sunny day, the summer probably. Mm-hmm. You can feel a light breeze on your face. You look around, see all those trees with those apples, and you decide just to walk up to one of those trees and pick one. Mm-hmm. And as you're picking an apple from that tree, you kind of listen to the sounds around you, maybe birds chirping, maybe just that sound of the breeze. And feel that warmth on your face. And I'd just like you to really feel that apple, like you're touching that apple. Really feel it. Feel the skin. Mm-hmm. And take it up to your nose. And just smell it for a moment. Right? How does it smell?
Yeah. Smells good.
And just take a crunch. Okay. How does it taste?
Skin's a little tough, but it's sweet.
Okay, you can open your eyes.
Okay.
And just tell me, so when you imagined yourself in that orchard, were you able to feel everything I was telling you about? Were you able to sense it with all your senses? Like, could you actually feel the breeze? Could you feel the sun? Could you hear any sounds? Could you feel the touch of that? I mean, could you touch that apple? Could you actually feel that? Could you actually taste it?
I guess the one that the weak spot for me is the touching of the apple, the feeling of the skin. I mean, I can feel it. I can actually taste it. I can feel it more in my mouth than I can with my hands, if that makes any sense. Yeah. But no, I was pretty much right there. It was like a dream. It was just like a waking dream right there. And so here we are at the top.
There you go. So basically, it sounds like you might be hyperphantasic because you seem to have a really good sense, like a really good visual, because when I was asking you to see the apple, you kind of saw it in more detail than I ever mentioned, right? And then you're also able to feel all the other senses. Now, I have aphantasia, which is the other side of the extreme, because we're all on the extreme in terms of this mental imagery. Some people are like you and can kind of sense things and see things as in real life. I'm on the exact opposite of the spectrum. So if somebody asks me to visualize an apple, I see absolutely nothing. It's completely black. I can think of an apple. I know what an apple looks like. I can't see anything. And some people with aphantasia are like me in terms of, well, we all can't, we all either can't visualize things at all or have very, very, very kind of poor visual imagery. But then some of us can access another internal sense. So some aphantasics can actually, feel smells or sense the touch. Some can. I'm like the complete extreme of the spectrum. So I don't have, I can't visualize, but also I cannot imagine any other internal sense. And that is basically aphantasia. So the general kind of concept of aphantasia is not being able to visualize, but it can be much more than that, because most aphantasics also cannot tap into one or more other internal sense, and about 25% of us are like me and cannot tap into anything at all. And it's a whole kind of different cognitive style as well, because aphantasia does impact on the way we process things, on the way we think. So there's a number of other characteristics, which I don't know if you want to go into or just,
Well, I do, but I want to first ask, how common is this? And I love that you say it's a spectrum and that there's like a whole range. It's not like it's a condition, right? It's not like it's it's not like it's something faulty, right? It's just something that a different way of looking at the world, different way of, see, there's that visual kind of metaphor, way of experiencing the world.
Yeah, so it's considered a neutral neurodivergence. So it's a neurodivergence like ADHD or autism, but it's considered neutral as in not impacting, negatively on our lives. Although some people who realize they have aphantasia feel really distressed. They have a sense of almost like a fear of missing out or a sense of distress, because it's often also linked with, some people are really distressed that they cannot visualize, the loved ones' faces. Or when you have aphantasia, very frequently, around 50% of us also have SDAM, severely deficient autobiographical memory, which means we don't remember much from our past, not many specific memories. And aphantasics also find it more difficult to kind of place themselves in the future, to imagine the future. So it impacts on all these little. So I call it a little quirk, really, because it does impact on the way we process emotions and think and work out tasks, basically. But it's not considered as any impairment.
Right. Now, is this something that you can train? That you can practice and get better at? Or it sounds like maybe the answer is no, because I imagine that many people have tried to change that if they're distressed over not being able to imagine things.
Yeah, so some people really want to change it. I don't want to 100% say you definitely can't, because there's a lot that we don't know about aphantasia at this stage. And just to mention that most people with aphantasia have so-called congenital aphantasia, so you're born with the condition. But some people lose the ability to visualize during their lifetime, for example, because of brain injury or because of some kind of psychopathology, right? So some kind of psychological disorder. So that is possible as well. And with kind of regaining visualization, if it's because there's something going on for you mentally, right, psychologically, then you can work on it. But if it's congenital, then I think the answer, well, so far, what we know, the answer is no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's go a little more personal, Pauline. If it's okay, I'd be curious to hear a little about your history with aphantasia. Like, when did you first discover that other people had these images that you didn't, and how has that affected you? You mentioned in your bio about hypnosis, that you were getting involved in that, but where did you first start to suspect that that you were thinking differently than others?
So it actually happened in a therapy session. So I was having psychotherapy, and the therapist, I think she asked me to go back to my childhood. And she was asking me to go back to a particular event, to think of some event and go back. And I just couldn't do that. Right? I have SDAM, right? I have the severely deficient autobiographical memory, which I had no idea about at the time, but I just don't have many specific memories of the past. And then she said to me, well, what about, do you remember the house you lived in when you were a kid? I said, yeah, I remember it. And she said, okay, well, what about, can you place yourself in that house? Can you remember the layout? I said, yeah, I can remember that. She said, okay, well, go back to that house. And what do you see? And I'm like thinking, what the heck is she talking about? And I said to her, nothing.
Yeah, nothing.
And she said to me, okay, what about, and she said, oh, interesting, nothing at all. I said, no, nothing. And she said, okay, well, what about your mum? If you think about your mum's face, can you picture it? And I said to her, no. And then she said to me, then she did this apple test with me, right? She said to me, well, how about if you imagine an apple and turn it around in your head? Can you see it? And at that point, I literally burst out laughing like a crazy woman. And I said to her, of course not. Like, who can do that? And she said to me, about 99% of the population. I was like, what? Because at the time, the estimate was that about 1% of the population have aphantasia, right?
Right.
And
but they
and
think
that's how I discovered.
Wow. Were you a young woman then, or how?
No. I'm not. I'm not a young woman anymore. So I'm 51, and I discovered about 6 years ago. About 6 years ago. So it was late in life.
Wow.
Because earlier it's and a lot of people discover the same way I do. I mean, the same way. We only discover when we start doing something that actively requires using mental imagery and comparing it to others, right? Because one thing I never understood was I hated meditation. Anytime I tried, people were saying to me, oh, Paulina, you're a bit nervous. You should go and try meditation.
Right.
And it was just like the worst thing for me because later in life I also discovered I had ADHD, so it was a bit of a double whammy, really. Sitting there without movement, somebody's taking you through this guided process, and I can't see anything. I'm bored out of my head. And instead of relaxing, I'd be going through the whole shopping list in my mind, right? So, or all my problems or whatever. So, but I never realized that other people could actually visualize. I thought picture something was just a figure of speech, basically.
Okay.
And so there are only certain situations, I think, in your life, and it wasn't spoken about at that time, right? The term was only coined in 2015, so it's very, very, very recent that it's been kind of rediscovered by science. So so nobody was talking about it.
Right. Okay. And you were very functional for most of your life without needing this ability to picture things. So interesting. And so what have you? Well, let's get to dreaming. Like, how does that affect? How do you actually dream? Then, do you have images, or of course, apparently you don't have any images, but is there other? And you say you don't really have the other senses so much either. I read somewhere that sometimes aphants imagine things in words, like I guess printed words, or like what is dreaming like for you? I guess let's just start with that.
Well, see, I actually have really, really vivid dreams, like crazy dreams, and they're like films. And I think that's one of the reasons I never realized I was different than anybody else, because I had these crazy dreams. And when I would speak to people about them, they'd just say, oh my God, that's wild, right?
But very visual. You're saying they were very visual?
Very, very, very visual. I have very visual dreams. And I can I don't access all of my senses in dreams. I can see, I can hear. I can't taste or smell, but I feel movement, so I have a lot of senses in my dreams that I don't have when I'm trying to access mental imagery internally. And and I think that's quite interesting from the point of view of hypnosis as well. Actually, I forgot to mention the hypnosis earlier.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Just to maybe bring back the point that, I never thought of it when I discovered aphantasia. I never thought of it as a problem. And then I tried, I got interested in hypnosis and I started training in it. And it appeared that I'm a really difficult hypnotic subject. Because a lot of hypnotic techniques are actually based on mental imagery. So you're asking people to imagine scenes, to imagine that their eyes are getting heavy, or the hand is or arm is getting stiff. So there's a lot of imagery, both kind of motor imagery in it, but also you are kind of trying to access people's senses, like the visual, the sense of hearing, all the senses, right? It's very, very frequent that you use that kind of guided processes in hypnosis. And when I started training, I kind of realized that I can't do any of this. I just can't. I knew I couldn't visualize, but I didn't realize how much a barrier it can be to undergoing like these certain processes.
Oh, wow.
And so that's why I got interested in the links between aphantasia and hypnosis, and how can we work with people who don't have access to these senses, because I know hypnosis is really powerful and I've actually experienced it, right? But
so you were able to actually find a way to get to
So I've had many failed hypnosis sessions for myself. Like, I don't even know how many. But I've had maybe 2-3 successful sessions. And these were done a bit differently than the other ones. So I was aware that there is a way of working with people like me. But, and then when I started my research project, in the beginning I was thinking, oh, cool, I'm just going to develop this protocol for working with people with aphantasia.
Right.
And then when I started diving deep into this research and doing experiments with a group of aphantasic hypnotherapists, I found that we are all really, really different. So the thing that we have in common is that we cannot visualize. But apart from that, as I say, some people can tap into another internal sense, some people can't. Some of us have another neuro-divergence in the mix, like autism or ADHD, others don't. And it's just a really broad variety of ways of imagining, I guess I should say. And I kind of see that reflected in dreaming. Yeah. So, and I know it seems counterintuitive that how is it possible that you cannot visualize voluntarily, you cannot do it when you try, but you can see in your dreams.
Right. Well, for example, like this morning I woke up with a dream, and the way that I kind of bring it into waking memories, I just repeat the dream to myself, to my waking mind, and then I just kind of visualize it a few times, and then I write it down. So, but it sounds like you would not be able to even do that.
No, I depend on my memory.
Okay.
I depend on my memory. But I do think that it's interesting that most people with aphantasia can actually dream visually.
Okay.
Apparently, there is some research into this. Apparently, the dreams of people with aphantasia are usually kind of, how should I put it, less quality. So not as vivid as those of people who can visualize. And some people with aphantasia don't have dreams, or don't remember them, or don't see anything in their dreams. So it's the same for them as trying to visualize. It's just like black there. And they can't feel maybe there's something there, but they cannot see anything, right? So again, it's a really broad spectrum. And I feel that with dreams, it's an even broader spectrum, that actually with this kind of waking imagery, which I think is really, really interesting. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, interesting. So there's like this huge range of approaches, abilities, I guess to say, or kinds of dreams. And so I'm almost wondering, do you want to talk a little bit about your specific dreams? I mean, you mentioned in your kind of list of topics about prophetic dreaming and lucid dreaming, and I wonder if you want to go into, you say they're really wild, and that makes me curious, of course, as a dream person. It's like, what is a
wild dream?
Right. I mean,
well, the wild from my point of view, because
right.
A lot happens in them. They're like completely wacky movies, basically. And some of the things, I just wake up and I think, what is in my head? Like, honestly, what is going on there? Like, where are these thoughts coming from? Because I get dreams. Like, I remember once I had this dream where I was on a spaceship. And, and I'm not even interested in sci-fi, right? I don't watch sci-fi movies. I don't read about it. It's not really something I'm interested in. But I found myself on the spaceship with my child, and we got attacked by these aliens. And one of the aliens, it just looked like this huge larvae, right? And jumped onto my kid's back and kind of sucked into it. And it was just... And I was standing there thinking, oh my God, how do I find help? There's some kind of emergency going on here. Who do I turn to? Who is actually with us? Who is against us? It was just crazy. And these visuals were just crazy, right? And I woke up and honestly, I was just thinking, what the heck?
Right.
And that's quite frequent for me. And then I don't know, like, if you ever have those dreams where you see something which are a bit more realistic, and you see something, and then a few weeks or months later you kind of see that thing in real life. So I kind of call them a prophetic dream, but maybe it's not prophetic. It's just as if you're able to sense the future in some way or see into the future. And for me, it's always been small details that don't really matter. It wasn't anything big that I had a dream or importance that I was dreaming about. It could be literally a stone lying on a pavement, and I'd be walking past the stone months later thinking, I've seen this. Or I could see myself writing something in a jotter when I was at school. And again, I'd be sitting there in a lesson writing, and I'm thinking, oh my God, this is what I saw in my dream, right? So that always really makes me wonder, because I think, how is that even possible? What does that tell us about reality or
right.
I don't know.
And why don't they tell us the important stuff, like that your car's going to break down before you...
Exactly.
Like, why don't they tell... I've heard this often called precognitive dreams, but prophetic dreams works too. And my precognitive dreams are, like you say, are usually pretty mundane. And that it's, in fact, even my regular dreams are actually fairly mundane typically, which is interesting as a very vivid visualizer. Maybe I get all my visualization in during the day or something, and that I often dream about, waking life things, or this morning I was, my son was driving the van and he drove it into a ditch on the side of the road, and I had to take over and back up and get out of the ditch. They're like fairly mundane kind of things.
No, mine are just completely. As I say, mine are just wild, basically, and some of them are so incredibly visual that I sometimes wish I was an artist and I could actually represent what I see in dreams, because some of these dreams, they're so powerful that I remember them literally. There's one that I think I had when I was, 20 maybe? One that I had over 20, maybe even 30 years ago. And I still remember because it was so visually beautiful. And it was basically it was like a scene from a film. I could see this beautiful staircase in some mansion, like a marble staircase. And then a very wide one, very, very grand. And then there were people walking up the staircase. So there were women on the right, women and girls on the right, and men and boys on the left. They were all dressed in black. It kind of, I was thinking maybe we're in Italy, because of the way the women were dressed, and they had these veils on their heads as well. It was something European, but not from my kind of culture. So, and as they were passing this point on the staircase where the stairs were going, the staircase was kind of dividing into going right and left. As they were walking up to this point, all the men and women, when they got there, they would suddenly be in flames. So they suddenly would start burning. It was just like flames. They were walking through flames. They would disappear. But then the children that were following them, they would walk through the flames untouched.
Wow.
And it was just, I was so amazed. I mean, even now when I'm talking about it, I get goosebumps because I'm thinking that was just such an incredible thing to see in my dream.
Right. So, but
honestly,
yeah. But I mean, as you're telling this to me, I'm of course picturing every little detail, and as you add the next thing about the people bursting into flames, I'm adding that detail to my imagination, and I take it you're just kind of remembering the words. Do you remember the images? Can you remember images? Wow. I mean, I can
remember sometimes. I mean, I can remember seeing something. I know it's a bit difficult to explain to people. It's a bit like, and a lot of aphantasics say the same thing, that it feels like almost like there's a black curtain and everything is behind that curtain. Everything that you're thinking of. So you know what the apple looks like, but you cannot see it. It's almost like there's a picture. It's almost like looking at a blank computer screen and knowing where the files are. It's this kind of impression, and for people with aphantasia, often, you know, like in the hypnosis world, for example, some people don't really think it's a thing or think that you're blocking it, right? And a lot of people say to me, "Oh, you can't visualize. Okay, what color is your door?" And that question actually drives me nuts, to be honest, because I see my door every day. I know what color my blinking door is. If you can't, because I think there's this really strong assumption that in order to remember what something looks like, you need to visualize it. But you don't. That's where the cognitive styles come in, the differences. So we don't have the visual. We have a memory of seeing something. So it's almost like you're going through the files on your laptop, you know?
Yeah. Oh, that is interesting. Yeah. And, you know, one of the ways that I would work with a dream, typically, like you've mentioned two really beautiful dreams already here, and I would like have the person imagine themselves in the dream and like to notice the feelings. Like you have emotions, clearly emotions come up for you while you're describing these dreams. And so so you're able to feel emotions, even though there's no images that come up for you. So it's interesting. So maybe the focus would be then on the emotions rather than trying to visualize something or.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's something that. I'm exploring that, for example, with hypnosis, for example, right? Where, as I say, you tap into visuals quite a lot, usually, visuals and other sensory details. What I find more is if you tap into somebody's body, into their breath, into anything that they're feeling in their body, it's much more effective for people with aphantasia because you don't need to be making anything up.
Okay.
You don't need to try to see things that you don't see things. And I often... You know, I try to explain to people that, you know, do hypnosis or guided meditation that, you can ask us to pretend, but then it becomes like to pretend seeing something, but you don't really have an emotional connection then because it's an intellectual exercise. You're trying to create something in your head. You're trying to think of something that you cannot actually see. And what we actually want to do in these kind of modalities, you know, be it hypnosis or meditation, it's to enable people to tap into their emotions so that you can then work with the emotions, right?
Right, exactly. You got it. That's exactly how I work with dreaming. That's what's important to me about dreaming is the emotions. And you have obviously a wide spectrum of emotions available to you. So, Paulina Trevena, this is really wonderful to talk to you. We're going to take a short break and we're going to come right back. We'll have a lot more to talk about aphantasia and dreaming, and maybe we'll get some callers about people with aphantasia or experiences with people who know about aphantasia or even just a dream that you'd like to talk about. So, I'd like to say this is the Dream Journal, and we are broadcast live from the KSQD studios in Santa Cruz and co-broadcast live in San Jose by KCXU. And our guest, as I said, is Paulina Trevena, Trevena. And we'll be right back. Next week, our guest will be Christian Garricky, who's a long-term IASD member, and we're going to learn a lot more about him next week. I also want to thank our underwriters, maca.us.com, that they sell some wonderful progressive gear, and I have already made America more conscious by purchasing a t-shirt. So thank you very much for your support, maca.us.com. So you can check us out on Instagram and Facebook by following hashtag The Dream Journal. I give promotions of upcoming shows so you can find out what's happening, and the occasional shareables. So today's guest is Paulina Trevena, and she's calling us from Great Britain to talk about aphantasia, which is a kind of spectrum of neurodiversity in which you cannot access images. You cannot make internal images. You cannot picture things to yourself. It's a little hard for me to even talk about, being such a vivid visualizer myself. I can visualize, but I can't talk, apparently. Okay, well, our guest is Paulina Trevena, and we have a caller already from Donna Glee. Thanks so much for calling in.
Hi there. I'm so appreciating the work you're doing, helping the dream community become more familiar with aphantasia, because I'm a dream worker, and I do have an aphantasic in one of my dream groups. And I fell prey to a lot of the mistakes that Paulina was describing. Mm-hmm. When she first told me she didn't see things in her mind, I thought, well, I didn't believe her.
Try a little harder.
Yeah, try a little harder. Maybe you haven't practiced, and it was after she first went, and I'm putting that in invisible air quotes because it was on Zoom, she went to an international meeting of something called the Aphantasia Network. Mm. And that was a powerful turning point for her, where she became a more confident advocate for the way her own mind works, and educated me. And it was important because, like Paulina mentioned, in hypnosis, I'm not a hypnotist, but I do use things that I've learned in my training in hypnosis in my Dreamwork groups to help people step into one of the entities in their dreams. Mm-hmm. And when I was trained in hypnosis, the best practice idea was you would, if you were working with an individual, you would determine their preferred sensory modality and start with that and build out from there. And if you were working with a group or didn't know, assume it was visual. Almost mm-hmm. everybody's visual. Mm-hmm. Go for visual. So I have learned, because I do a fair amount of sort of light induction, guided imagery in dream groups, that there are other ways to work. And my particular dreamer, who has aphantasia, has very can really attain kinesthetic sensations. So if I go in and say, feel your fingernails growing out into feathers and the strength of the wings as they attach to your back, that will work for her. Mm. Now, she also does dream visually, and when she comes to dream group to report a dream, what she describes is that she remembers it conceptually. Like, she knows she experienced it visually. She remembers it conceptually. She also has strong visual imagery in the hypnagogic state. And that's a dream jargony word for in that twilight state as you are drifting from waking into sleeping. She has vivid visual imagery there. And she also has strong spatial sensations, like she can lie in bed at night and feel the layout of her house around her. So I can work with that as I'm going along, if I'm doing a guided imagery. Now, another interesting thing about her is that she is a visual artist.
Oh, wow.
And I have heard her teaching and describing her process, and she describes it as a two-step thing, and the first step is hunting and gathering, where she just scans for the material or the color that looks right, feels good, that she wants. So she will have masses of things in front of her, and she will scan the waking world material in front of her, pick out what she wants. And then the second step is placement. So she will then place things in a way that pleases her, experimenting as she goes along. She doesn't have a previous image in her head that she is trying to build out through her visual art.
Do they tend to be abstract, Donna Glee, these images?
Often they are, but not always. She was doing some fiber art collage things that were representational, but she says she doesn't build it in her head first. She finds it in front of her.
Paulina, does that surprise you? Or because I mean, you know a lot more about this than I do.
No.
She's a visual artist.
No, it doesn't, because I know that even within the Aphantasia network, right? I was once in this I'm part of it as well, and I was once in this workshop or discussion, really, and it was a discussion between artists with aphantasia and artists who could visualize or even had hyperphantasia, so were really, ultra visualizers. Mm-hmm. And I found it really interesting that aphantasics were basically describing the process the same as our caller just had, that, they were saying, I have this idea, I have a concept, and then I get dirty. Yeah, right. I get down to it. It's hands-on. I kind of choose the materials. I have a look. I rearrange. I draw. So it's a very work in progress process. Whereas some of the artists with hyperphantasia were saying, actually, I'm almost jealous because I feel like I'm recreating art rather than creating art, because it's already all in my head. And all I'm doing is bringing it to life.
And then I get frustrated. Personally, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I get frustrated that I can't create exactly what I see in my mind, because it's so detailed in my mind. But then to put it down on the canvas is very difficult. So I'm a little jealous too.
Yeah, and I think it's really important what you mentioned about not disregarding people who say they can't visualize, because that's something that I see quite often in the hypnotherapy world, which is why I'm so passionate about raising awareness around aphantasia and explaining to other hypnotherapists, most of whom are really good visualizers or even hyper visualizers, that this thing actually exists, and it's not people blocking something, or it's not necessarily a result of a trauma. It's just a different way of thinking and a different way of relating to things. And as our caller mentioned, some people can tap into another sense, and then they're fine. They can do all these guided processes as long as you're not maybe too prescriptive with your language, as long as you're not asking them to see, because some people are very literal. So if you say see, even if they can imagine things through a different sense, like touch, this word see will just throw them off, right?
Right. It's kind
but some people, can't tap into that.
I see what you mean, haha.
Yeah, exactly. You can picture it. Right?
Totally.
Yeah.
So you have both mentioned resources, and I'd love to get some resources out there, and of course I'll put them on the episode page as well. There's something called the Aphantasia Network, I think I've heard you both say. Yes. What is that, and is that like a web page, or how do people get to that? Find that?
It's a network of both clinicians and people with that are on somehow the spectrum of imagery difference. They call it image-free thinking, and that's been a useful term for me. And it's very empowering for people to get hooked up. Another friend, a poet friend, not one of my dreamers, had a head injury and lost her access to the florid imagistic world that she had lived in all her life and was very distressed by it. And because of my dreamer having turned me on to the Aphantasia network, I was able to share that with her, and she felt so relieved, that there was a world there to be explored. And I personally hope that sometime, Paulina, you share and maybe even on this program, you share some of your strategies for hypnotic inductions that don't involve, the one thing that will drive people nuts.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that. I do run workshops from time to time, so that's something that I can mention. And I think Aphantasia Network is a great resource. They have so much information. I'd also written a short article for them on aphantasia and hypnotherapy, basically, and hypnosis, and made some suggestions there from what I remember. I do a lot around this, so I kind of forget. Or just to also mention that if somebody has an interest specifically in aphantasia in the context of hypnosis, or aphantasia and hypnosis, I run a Facebook group called Aphantasia and Hypnosis Research Lab, and we kind of share experiences there. I'll also be doing more work about sharing my findings, basically, and what I'm doing. But thanks for that, because I really believe there's a huge need to raise awareness, because, we live in a world where most people can visualize, and it doesn't even cross people's minds that other people can't access these modalities, and we all know how powerful they are, right? And they're used in so many different ways. They're used in, hypnosis, dreamwork, right? Meditation, coaching, education, while there's a whole bunch of people who just cannot tap into that. And it always makes you feel like a bit of a failure. And if you don't realize that other people can visualize, you don't even understand why you can't do it. Because it's not obvious.
Well, I think it's wonderful to be able to tap into a group of people who have similar situation. And I've looked up, it's called aphantasia.com, seems to be the name of the network. And it's Aphantasia is APHAN and then TASIA. So aphantasia.com is one place that you can find. And I'll find a link to that Facebook group that you mentioned, Paulina, as well, and put it on the web page, on the episode page. And because of just finding a group of people who have the same situation, I don't even want to call it condition. I'm looking for a word. The same way of thinking, way of being in the world, and how they cope with it would be really valuable.
Yeah.
And if I can just pick up on, sorry.
Donna Glee, why don't you? Do you have?
It's an invisible difference.
Yeah.
So, and you're doing a great piece of work right now, Catherine, to help make it more visible to people.
Thank you. Well, this is actually Donna Glee Williams. I should tell you the full name. I never know how anonymous to make our callers, but I thought if it'd be okay for you to introduce you, Donna Glee, who is also an author and has been on the show before. And she contacted me a little while ago saying that she'd learned recently about aphantasia, and I really thank you so much for turning me on to this whole phenomenon and how it relates to dreaming.
Yeah. Well, thank you for following up. And I'm so glad to meet you, Paulina, even across the distance.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. And thanks for sharing.
All right. Sure. Thanks. Take care, Donna Glee.
Bye.
Okay. Bye. So, Paulina, we had a possible request of talking about different techniques you use with hypnosis, but we have, about 6 minutes left. And I wonder, do you have any topics that you want to get to that we really haven't covered that or would be important to you?
I can speak a bit about the techniques in a moment, but I've just realized that I've not maybe mentioned one thing that always surprised. I mean, I said in the beginning that it might be counterintuitive.
Yeah.
It might appear counterintuitive that people who cannot visualize in waking life have visual dreams, right? But I forgot to explain that in any way.
Okay.
And just to say, I'm a social scientist by background, not a neuroscientist, so I never remember the kind of different parts of the brain and so on. But just to explain to people, because a lot of people think it's impossible. How is it possible that you can't visualize, but you do have dreams? That means that there's somewhere beyond your consciousness, and you can't access them in waking life, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is that I've learned from neuroscience is that it's different regions of the brain and different neurochemicals that are at play when you're in dream state, an REM state, and when you're in waking state. So I just wanted to explain that to our listeners, because that's something that people always pick up on, like, how is it possible? Because they kind of assume that it's the same process in a way, but it's not.
And now, are there some aphants who don't even dream in images, who just...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There are some. Yeah, and before coming onto this program, I thought actually I'd just ask in my group, about people's experiences with dreams, just to see what they say, what kind of experiences they have, because as I say, we all have really different experiences, and they were so varied. Again, they were so varied. Some people were saying, "Oh, I have," like me, right? I have wild dreams, and murder cases happen there, and comedy, and all sorts of stuff, right? And then other people were saying, "Oh, I sometimes have dreams. I don't remember them well. I don't really see anything in any detail." So it's again, I can kind of picture something, but I can't really see it in any detail. And other people were saying that it's completely the same as in waking state from them. So they see black in dreams as well. They just know there's something there. They kind of almost know something is happening, but they can't imagine, they can't see it. Which even I find difficult to imagine how that works, right?
Right.
So yeah, it just seems like such a wide variety of experiences. And I was just wondering if I could maybe throw a question out there to our listeners, if anybody is listening, because also when I was looking at what people wrote about their dreams, some of these people I know quite well, and I know that they also have ADHD. And it was interesting for me that the people that were writing that they have these really wild, vivid dreams, I know that those particular people also have ADHD. So I was kind of wondering, and maybe Catherine, if there's any connection actually between ADHD and how people experience dreams. Because what I do know, and talking about mental imagery, like wakeful mental imagery, is that people with ADHD or autism are more likely to be on one or the other imagination spectrum. So either they're more likely to be aphantasic or hyperphantasic, right? And have a really, really vivid imagination.
Interesting. No, I don't know about that. I would love to hear about that. If anybody out there wants to be a guest on a future show, we could learn a lot more about the connection between ADHD and dreaming. I think there's probably a lot to be said about that, not just around aphantasia as well, but just in other ways. I think there might be a very interesting topic to explore. I don't know about that.
Yeah, so as I say, I have no idea. I'm throwing it out there because it's just something I've observed, but it's just based on a few opinions. So I'm really curious if there might be something there.
Okay.
And also one more thing, because our caller Donna Glee, did I get
Donna
that
Glee,
right? Donna Glee, also picked up on, she mentioned the hypnagogic state.
Yes.
And that the person that she's working with can access imagery in a hypnagogic state. And that's my experience as well, that if I'm in a really deep, let's call it trance, because a deep trance state is basically a hypnagogic state, right? It is a state between being aware and being unaware, or being awake and being in a dream, if you go really, really deep. And that is when mental imagery sometimes just comes to me. And what is different about that mental imagery is that it is kind of directed by what I'm hearing. So it's not entirely voluntary. It's not the same way as, picture an apple and I see an apple. But when I'm in this hypnagogic state, I've realized that if somebody is describing something to me, those images are more likely to come to me, and I'm more likely to actually see them. It's happened a few times. It's not something that happens frequently, but maybe that is something that you can actually work on.
Interesting.
And I kind of, when we started talking, I mentioned lucid dreaming. Now, it's not something I do, and it's not something I know that much about, to be honest. But I have come across a few people with aphantasia who mentioned that they do it, and they can do it, this lucid dreaming, which again I think is really interesting to explore, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. That's really interesting. So we're pretty much at the end of our show now, and I want to thank you so much for coming on the show, Paulina. This is Paulina Trevena. Do you have a webpage? You didn't send me one, but maybe I missed it.
No,
Do not.
I didn't miss it. It's under construction at the moment. It's literally being made. So
That's
I will have a webpage called paulinatrevena.com pretty soon, within the next 2 weeks.
Oh, well, then I'll put it on the episode page so folks can, because a lot of people listen to the show and replay.
Right.
So I'll write that. paulinatrevena.com. Are there other ways that people can get in touch with you and what you offer? You do hypnosis, I know, and any other offerings?
Yes, I do. I do hypnosis. I do training education around aphantasia and working with people who have aphantasia. And at the moment, I do short trainings for hypnotherapists. But I would very, very much welcome any opportunities to speak to a broader variety of people, or different professionals. Because as I say, it's honestly this modality, tapping into mental imagery, is used in so many different contexts. As I say, coaching, meditation, at schools. One that really is important, psychotherapy. And one thing that I really think about a lot, that we really need more education there, is actually the psychiatric space. Because a lot of, when we think about mental health symptoms, a lot of these are geared towards mental imagery, right? Like things like PTSD, you look at people's visual flashbacks, but people with aphantasia don't experience visual flashbacks.
Ooh, but they might still have PTSD.
But they can still have PTSD. So I kind of think there's all these areas, professional areas, where I would like to raise awareness, and I'm more than happy to do talks or trainings for people.
Wonderful, thank you. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, we got.
Sorry, and I forgot to say because I ramble a bit. ADHD, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I go off on a tangent, but if you want to get in touch with me, you'll find me on LinkedIn under Dr. Paulina Trevena, or you can message me through my Facebook business page, which the name is a bit long. I need to shorten it, but it's No Woo Woo. Aphantasia, ADHD, and hypnotherapy with Dr. Paulina Trevena.
Okay, thank you. This is fabulous. Take care, Paulina, and thanks so much for being on the show.
No, thanks so much for inviting me, and I'll be excited to listen to the next episodes, because you've just re-sparked my interest in dreams.
Far out. Okay, well then my mission accomplished. That's it. Spreading interest in dreams. Check.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. Well, thank you, Paulina, and thank you, Elle, for listening. The Dream Journal is produced at the studios of KSQD in Santa Cruz. We are live every Saturday at 10 a.m. Pacific at ksqd.org, and the podcast is released on the Monday after the show. It spreads interest in dreaming whenever you subscribe, rate, and review. My name is Catherine Bell, and find out about my dream coaching practice at experientialdreamwork.com. You can email me at catherine@ksqd.org, SKATHERINE@ksqd.org. Follow Experiential Dreamwork and hashtag the Dream Journal on Facebook and Instagram to find out about upcoming show. Thanks so much for Rick Kleffel for engineering and the music, and Tony Risamano answering the phones. Intro and outro pieces are both by Mood Science. Tomorrow morning when you wake up, take a minute to write down your dream and bring it to the next Dream Journal.
Where